course, those of us who survived COVID, right, the health bit, now the economic bit, it has hit us so much that those now living on the poverty line, we've attained a lot. Ghana was one of the countries that was being applauded, that we even managed to have our poverty levels before 2015. Now, I don't know, they have even, I think nobody wants to get scared, so we don't want to talk about the figures. We have nosedived. So, and then what happens when we have nosedived and have a 15-year-old who is sitting at home and you tell the person not to work? And then those, some of the 15 years old, they look at their younger siblings. Years back, when I was very young and I joined Commission on Children, I was also one of those who was thinking, you have to get the kids out of the street and all that. Very, it offends our sentiment to see children on the street wiping cars and all that, selling donuts and all that. And I had to go to some of these communities where the children come from, right? When I came back, I became an advocate. They have to be on the streets because they have only two options. No, they have only two options. Either they stay in the village and die or they move. That is, and now, and here we've left out those in the urban poor. You see, we only look at those in the villages. What about the urban poor? Those who live in Teshi, all apologies, Choko, Jamestown, right? Dark Bogloshis. Those who live in the periphery. They leave their urban kids. And so for urban kids, going to somebody's farm to go and steal cassava is non-existent. You have to buy kinky. You have to buy it with money. But those are but those of you working in the field, I think you are doing great. The mountain is becoming steeper, but we have to start somewhere. When you showed the video, my question was, so how many communities are you doing this in? So you've targeted the cocoa communities. Those are, for me, are the low-hanging fruits. Are those that maybe if we don't get it done, we don't get to sell our cocoa. But when we talk about children, child labor, we've actually left out the commercial sex workers. There are so many of them. But still, I don't want us to pat each other that we've done so much, because the mountain is becoming steeper. But we have to start somewhere. And so I must say that PDA with your counterparts, you are doing very well. So maybe you show this video more for others also to go to other aspects, because we are targeting the cocoa farming. We have the galamsey. We have the timber. We have so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that call to action. And so those on the field, Francis, perhaps you can start off with us. What would you say is the situation of the working child in Ghana? And as I ask him that, I may be coming back to some of the other panelists, because we are trying to clearly distinguish between child labor that we are talking of, and then, like both Mama Lizzie and then Prof mentioned, those who are within the acceptable range, maybe 15 years old, who are choosing to work and engaging in economic activities, either to support their families or to support their siblings or to support themselves. So, but on the field, what would you say is the situation of the working child, the average working child?
Okay, well, thank you. Good morning to all the people listening to us. Looking at the issue of child labor, one of the key things about the working child and child labor is that there is confusion out there. And if you look at it, we've done a lot of ratifications. In Ghana, in terms of the law, as they have eloquently pasted, if you look at it, 138 was talking about the minimum age, which we have ratified, and we have decided to go for the higher side of 15 years instead of some countries going for 14 years. So what it means is that for 15 years, you can actually work and get paid, so do an economic activity by law. We've also been able to do the other ratifications and produce the hazardous framework for the both agricultural sector and the cocoa sector. Now, and then the Children's Act. Now, if you look at working child, that is where the issue now becomes blurred for some of the people. So most of the times, if we say child labor, people think that any child doing any work is child labor. Children shouldn't work. The beginning of this, when we started as pioneers, so you are not supposed to work. And then when the laws came, then we were able to categorize, define, and be able to then come out with the conventions interpretation, and then localize it in terms of our sectors. So if you look at the whole thing, we have breaking. So the 5 to 17 years is where the issue is. But then before I talk about where we are now, the confusion is that there are 3 stages of the child in terms of what they can do. So we talk about the 5 to the 12 years where they can do the socializing work, and then the 13 and above doing the light work, and then 15 years being able to do a full economic work. This is a confusing law in terms of how you implement. So if you look at Auntie Lizzie, when she was saying it, made even reference to other countries where children below the ILO itself, the economic age, being able to do economic activities. But then when we were drafting the law, we made sure we wanted to comply, and therefore we chose 15 years. Whereas in the developed country, children can engage in economic activities below that age. So these are now where we are faced with. So what we are calling socializing work, it becomes culturally blurred. So it is very difficult if you are not, which law are you using? Are you using the General Agriculture, are you using the Cocoa Half, or what law, or the Children's Act? Yes, so now we saw the need to come up with the new half and harmonize all of them. But then out there in the field, we are yet to publish and then start the sensitization on that. So as soon as you say child work, people think when a child works, it is child labor. That confusion should go out the window. Now if we actually then look at where we are now is that there is a lot of information in the field. But then what we have failed to do is that we have done all the awareness creation, but this is a behavioral change education. And that is the technical part we have not done. So we just create awareness, tell them that this is the meaning of the things. This is what is accepted. This is not what is accepted. But we have not looked at how to design it to cause the change that we want. Giving people information alone does not mean that they will be able to work with that information. There are certain limitations, and then there are certain interventions and certain facilities and facilitations and interventions that we need to do also to push this to make sure it works. So I think that most of the time we are using the word child work, child labor interchangeably, and it's very technical. And until we are all at the same level, have the gray areas of how we actually interpret. Now, the other challenge is the baseline data we don't have. We've never had a proper survey, so we rely on the NOC and then the Ghana Living Standards that were done, some 10, 6, 8 years ago, and it's not even comprehensive. They are still surveys that were done pocket. So we are not able to measure where we are going, how we are performing, where we are failing. Because before you can know where you are, you should know where you came from. And we are not too sure where we came from. So that is also another challenge. We say that per the statistics, roughly about 2 million children, or 20%, are in child labor. And another 20% of them roughly are in hazardous work. I mean, some of them quote 6%, 8%, 10%. But what are they calling child labor? That is also another key issue. If you come to technicalities, if a child is doing light work, it can still be child labor because you can have hours issues. There are certain things that will make that permissible work not permissible. If a child is doing, economic activity 18 and above or above 14 years, they will be doing work that is allowed, but there are certain conditions that will be prevailing that will make it child labor. And that is why it is gray. It is only, and some of them haven't done any work, but it is still child labor. See, the word child labor is a synonymous that we use to mean the infringement of the child rights. What did that also? But then they may not have done any work. The child is sitting at home, decided not to go to school 9 years, not doing any work. Technically, it is child labor. I hope you are getting it, because Nedache, you are looking at, the future, the educational, the potential of the child, not being harnessed, not being given the right incentive. So when you use the word child labor, the word labor, people means that there is some work involved, and then we all tend to just focus on work. Whereas the child can actually work and will not be involved in a child labor. It will not be detrimental to their school, their mental well-being, or their future. So that is how I see what is happening in the field. We've made a lot of progress, but we need to get the facts right so that we will be able to drive ourselves to see where we were from, where we are now, and how we can forge forward to make this canker go away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis. And let me just now throw it back to the full panel. He has already now started highlighting some of the key challenges that we've been facing as a nation in trying to deal with the issue of child labor. The SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, the target was that by 2025, we should have eliminated all forms of child labor. And we are almost in 2023, and it's not looking too good. So what are some of the other challenges that you can all sort of tease out from your various fields, from research, from the practice and on the field, from the government side, that you think are some of the key things that have been hindering our ability to deal with child labor? Yes, Kamel.
Okay, so from my personal experience, I think I'll just mention one and maybe the rest can add up. The child labor remediation on the ground is mostly private sector led. The reason is that the private sector, let me take the cocoa industry, they have a lot to lose when they don't ensure that their cocoa is free of child labor. Government has all the policies, the framework, the institutions, but they don't, the resources. For instance, if you take one district, you have the Department of Social Welfare, you have the Child Labor Protection Committee, but they don't have the necessary resources to go to the ground and assist the people to do some of the things that Madam mentioned, like the Child Protection Community Child Protection Committee, the community action plans, the dialogue and sensitization. It's not there. You enter a typical social welfare department office in a district. The computer is from UNICEF. The motorbike is from, almost all the equipments there were donated by institutions. Very little from the government. But the cocoa industry, they are the ones, Beyond Beans, Kuyapa Cocoa, Barry Calibo, they are the ones pushing the agenda to end child labor in the cocoa industry. So I think until the government is able to mobilize the necessary resources to empower those institutions, we are still going to be where we are.
I see Madam Lizzie smiling in the corner.
Yes, let me. The Labour Department under the Ministry of Employment and Labour Relations has an inspectorate division that conducts establishment inspections in the various workplaces. And we all know that child labor can be found in the informal sector. And we know how difficult it is to enter the informal sector. Our mandate allows us to inspect both the formal and the informal sector. But for some time, we were concentrating on the formal sector because it was easy to go there and get the information and not the informal sector. But of late, we have given some training to our labor officers on how to enter the informal sector and to collect data. We have, last year, we collected some data from some of the regions in the informal sector. This year, at the beginning, I think around April, May, we went to Upper East, Upper West, and Northern, and we collected some information from the informal sector as well. We are challenged greatly because when you look at the department, we are not present in all the districts. Social welfare used to be under us, and it was very easy for us. Where there was no social labor department, we were using the social welfare, even though now we still do. But because they are not under us, there are a few challenges. And where the labor officer is, he is supposed to sort of oversee other districts that are closer. And it's not even easy for the labor officer in his district, because even the office that the officer is sitting in, the office equipment, some of them are not there. Just like my brother mentioned, you go, they are donated by our partners and little from government, even though government is also doing a lot. You know, it's not easy. Sometimes we blame government, but it's not easy. There's so much that government has to do. Government is like a woman who has to do everything in the house. So that's how we should see it. So the little that we have to do, we think that the partners should partner with us. Let's do it properly. You know, there are issues where people go to communities. You go there, you can find more than 5 partners, and they may be doing the same thing. You see, we have gone to some communities, and the community members too strategically will plan. They know when who is coming. When you go there, pretend that there's no other partner. Then you are working with them, and sometimes they provide almost the same thing, and it's duplication. But if we are able to come together, or when you are going to do an intervention in a community, you get there and you find out who are there. You'll be able to know what they are doing, what you want to do, whether you need to collaborate to do it, you need to do it in a different way, then we can forge ahead. But if this is not done, we'll continue to blame government. And government hasn't got enough to give everybody everything.
Thank you very much.
Let me. I wanted to say something about what my brother said in relation to maybe a child not in school, not working, but considered as child labor. You see, that is what we were looking at, or that is what we put in our laws, to the extent that they could ask whether you held a machete, that is a big cutlass, within some period. When the child answers whether the child used it to work or not, they say it's child labor. And what is the other question? Did you go to the farm with your parents on this day? They just answer, and it's child labor. But we are supposed to legalize the hazardous activity framework. If we put in this, the child is not in school, the child is not working, and we say it's child labor, it means it's criminal. That's what we are saying. And then we have to take action. So we are saying these things, we can single them out, or we can bring them out, and then there will be issues that are putting the children at risk. So that if a child is holding a machete, the child is at risk of hurting. But if we say it's child labor, our list will be too tall for us to carry. And so these are some of the things we are looking at. But initially, as he said, that's what we have been doing. So now we need to streamline this hazardous activity framework and let people know what is in it before we can go ahead to legalize it, and then it can be biting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm enjoying the conversation. At my organization, our theory of change look at the individual level, the community level, and the systemic, the country as a whole. I think it's our time we have to let individuals take responsibilities for their own lives and the number of children they have. Don't always look up to government, because I know most of us here are not always looking up to government in terms of our personal initiatives. For instance, we realize parental responsibilities, separation of families, and unplanned birth are some of the root causes leading to children going to work. Like one of the panelists said, children have to work to make money to support the home. Some of us work when we're young because there weren't enough income from our parents. We can put in measures, preventive measures, to make sure that child labor doesn't occur at all. The incident rate, the number of children who are going to work, let's stop it. Let's educate those our brothers and sisters who are low-income earners but have many children. So I know most of us in our extended family settings, we know relatives in our hometowns, in our villages, in our community who are into petty trade. By giving birth, that they don't know that children are cost to the limit where they can work and take care of themselves. How many people know that if you give birth, you have to bear the cost of paying school fees? the cost of feeding the child. People don't know. We should educate our people to take that responsibility. We've been in we've been in communities where doing programs, somebody raises his or her hand up and said, "Oh, my sister has many children. The project doesn't fit that particular child, but it's just they have many children, they can't feed them, so can he or she benefit from the project?" I said, "No. Why should you even give birth where you know you cannot take care of the child?" And that education needs to go out there. I think the problem we have in the country is we are not able to project and manage our population well, because our population resource distribution. If you are not creating enough opportunities, you can manage your population so that the bigger resources you have will be sufficient for the population. So that is another part we have to look at. We should educate people. Look, if you give birth to a child from class 6, from class 1 to university, it's a whole huge cost you have to bear. So look at your economic situation and give birth to the number of children you can manage. Then that will salvage the situation. Because they say prevention is better than cure. If we are looking at the prevalent rates, it's always going to create resource problem, and we are going to blame government. But at the personal level, we should put in a lot of effort to let people take initiative to address this problem. Thank you.
Thank you too very much. You also want to
Yeah. The angle I wanted to bring was for us to be able to achieve the SDG 8.7. We are on course as a country. I think if you look at that, it's heavily laden on the worst form of child labor. And we are now, we've done a lot. But then there are some areas of ratification that we are yet to do. In terms of the protocols on the sale of child and then exploitation, sexual exploitation of children and the rest, we haven't got the laws. Our institutions are also not resourced and equipped well to be able to deal with such cases, and that is a threat. I think one of the major setbacks for the SDG 8.7 will just be COVID, and some of us get a bit worried for the current economic situation, because child labor is linked directly to poverty. And the more we get these economic hikes and we are just dropping more people below the poverty line, it means that all the gains that we have made, we are losing the percentages. And it's incumbent that we look at the economic challenges that we are facing now and see how best we can resolve them collectively, wholly, and fully and quickly. Because without that, we're going to have a lot of problems. The other bit that we need to look at to be able to do the SDG will be one of the challenges that we have with this whole child labor approach. What we have seen is that we have been over the years a bit reactionary, knee-jerk actions, even though we have a systematic approach led by the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations and the Child Labor Unit, the National Plan of Actions and all the things. Yes, we are doing very well to make sure that we put things in place. But unfortunately, when there is a vacuum, all the effort you put in, you bend down and then you start to work and you forget that the line that you are carving, there are some little bit of meanderings and curves around them. We need to look at that. Child labor can never be eradicated, cannot be led by just one institution, one arm of government, or a collaboration of two. It cuts across every single sector. And the way we do our budgeting, where we do policy top down and then do the budget bottom up, it is important that we get to know how to coordinate the activities that will culminate into resolving all child labor issues. Because if it is not in that particular ministry's budget, it can never be implemented. And how it gets into the budget is also another way that we are creating the issues for ourselves. The system we have in place does not favor one person coordinating multiple departments, agencies, and ministries with a program. That is what the the Ghana National Planning Commission was supposed to do. But then you see that we don't have a plan for child labor. We have some under education, some under the Minerals Commission, some under environment, some under agriculture. It cuts across every single sector. And that is what we have seen. Now, if you look at it at the top, we have the National Steering Committee for Child Labor. It's very good for policy-wise, but in terms of muscle to actually implement, they don't have budget. Even the legal framework, we are yet to ratify most of these committees. So when it comes to child labor, I mean, now we are changing it, Auntie Lizzie. But we tend to use the term committee, which means that they don't have the muscle. They don't have budgets. They are not having any legal framework or power to actually force or implement or try to make sure that somebody is not complying, they should comply. They are mere committees from the CCPCs, the DCPCs, MCPs, then to right down to the National Steering Committee. Committees, then we are just going forward. So we need to look at, pragmatically, how to ratify these, make them accountable, give them budget, give them muscle, give them legal backing, and then they will be able to force the agencies and departments and ministries who have certain projects to do to be able to implement. Let's take, for instance, you need to build schools in some communities. What is the steering committee going to do? Just talk to Ministry of Education, beg them to do what? Without the budget, they can't. Even the ones that are in the budget, it is not being released. So we need to look at a policy that we have on child labor, and then we task and make sure that we bring in bodies and agencies that are mandated, that are given the legal framework and then the budgetary power to be able to actually cause real change. And then they will lead, and all of us will follow.
Thank you. Prof. Mamfu, do you want to add your voice to some of the key challenges that you are seeing in dealing with the issue of child labor?
Yeah, I think, much has been said, and the angles are different, and then see that us tackling the issue is multifaceted. That one has been echoed. And I also think that most of the, as Madam said, when this whole thing about child labor was started, it was started whilst using international frameworks, which had nothing to do with us. But for us, we got some money, so we were busily chasing it. So the interpretation of child labor was not sitting well with us. So at the top, it sat well with us, because at the top are educated people who have the value system. At the bottom, they face the realities. So they have a different conceptualization of what do we mean by child labor. But now, years on, we are changing the discourse. And then the labor unit where Madam is coming from, their initial task was for industry. And in Ghana, most of the child labor, I don't know of any company that employs 15-year-olds in Ghana. I don't know of any garment industry. I mean, like GTP or something. But our garment industries that employ children are the seamstresses. You see how this one looks? And they don't go chasing seamstresses who is having a 12-year or 8-year-old in a seamstress shop. You see, so the whole discourse, but now I think we have to conceptualize it differently. We have to, as a country, and then what, for instance, in Accra is defined as child labor. When you go to somewhere maybe in Wa, it's not. Accra, how many shepherd boys do you see in Accra? None. But when you get to the north, you see shepherd boys. So it's different. So the definition has to be different. If the regions will own their own thing, it will help. And for me, I also see that this issue of government, we have to, as a country, realize that government is not coming. We have to do it ourselves. Yeah. So for me, I'm happy that people, when social behavior takes a bit of time, but people know there's something that they are not supposed to do. But then, if those in Accra will come to Wa and come and tell Wa people what is wrong, they just look at them. I'm saying this because, as I told you, I've been around this country, and I know how people react. They say, okay, you people in Accra, you tell us what to do in the north. It's different. So people have to own it themselves. And for me, the advocacy shouldn't stop. We are having a lot of challenges, but it shouldn't stop. But then we now have to define it ourselves. But if we use the Indian version of child labor, it doesn't fit us. It doesn't fit us. So that's why people listen to it and say, okay. And then people go for the money. You see, I'm an academic, so I can say both sides. We have people in the industry who claim they are doing what they are doing the work, but it's their job. So they always have to say we have child labor issues for them to get a job. And you have government who also wants the whole world to know that, look, we are doing something. They will also say that those in the industry are not saying the truth. You know, but that is not it. But for me, once we are talking about it, it's good. But we need to redefine it and define it to suit ourselves. And then, you see, those in the community, they also become very smart, as Madam is saying. So, PDA will come, this will come, this will come. It's like when we are doing election campaign time. Those of you go to the community, they have all the tickets. If NPP is coming, they wait. If CPP is coming, they wait. Yes, because if you are in Accra, you don't know what's going on. So they are there, so they know. So, for us to say, when you go to the district, they don't have the cars, they don't have this and that. Yes, they don't have the thing, it's true. But I think there should just be like a gate. So people, all the agencies, the developmental agencies, to just pass through them. For them to know that, look, we are here. Then they can, and sometimes, often or not, they have the information. They know who is where. It's just that they cannot go to the village because they will tell you their motorbike has broken down for the past 6 years. So they sit in the office and they don't move. And I want to tell you that not all of them are bad. There are some at the district level, they don't wait for government. They are doing the work themselves. So they are very proactive. And they have some officials who, they ask for them, once government has not brought the money and the money will not come, they will move. So it depends on where you are going. But for me, one, we need to redefine it. And then two, we shouldn't kid ourselves. We say, as I said, I'm academic, so either we are not benefiting. The whole thing, where the donors are coming, is their interest, right? So the cocoa company knows that if they don't buy the right cocoa, they don't go to the blah, 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 right? So they say how this one goes. So they are also leading. So as a group, and where Madam is coming in, sometimes you people to have to look at it a bit more critically. But when you see the dollars coming, you don't even ask questions, and then we move. Then somewhere in the middle, we just start and say, okay, hang on, what are you talking about? That because, you see, so sometimes it also helps for us to actually look at it, because we are all Ghanaians here. Look, the donors, they are not in love with that. They have their own agenda. We get to the table without any agenda. When they come themselves, okay, what do you want? We'll do it. In the middle of it, then we say, hang on, what we are doing is not the right thing. But already we have committed ourselves, taking the money, right? And our communities, they will just be looking at that. They know nothing will come out of it. But we want something to come out of it. And then for me, I'm not throwing my hands up that we've lost. We haven't. You know, look, when we get the children, they get to know that this is wrong. But they will define it properly for them. The cycle will break it. So for instance, PDA making sure that some communities are having, even the lady with her printers, right? For me, one poverty cycle is broken. She will make sure her children go to school. And though they live in the village, they will do something else. And sometimes we blame those who live in the communities that they don't take their children to school and that. Sometimes there are no schools there. What are they supposed to do? The other is saying they are having too many children. In the communities, having children is a status symbol. So you need to have 10 children. So you are saying you have 2 wives. It's a status symbol. You know, so we are saying if you have 2, why should I have 2? When you are in the urban area, because you have to take your child to school, you are having problems. They walk to school. You know, so I'm actually for small children, but small numbers of children. But here I'm trying to say is that we impose our value system the same way that we say the donors should not impose their value system. We, the educated, also try to impose our value system on the community, where if I have 10 children, I'll be celebrated. They give me what they will call it. I'll be celebrated. I'll wear white. A lot of people will come. Then you are saying, have to. Why? You know, those are some of the questions you have to ask.
Thank you very, very much. And the conversation is really interesting and it's getting intense. Yeah. And you know, there are even a few questions coming in from the online platform as well. But there are 3 that I think we can use to sort of bring our discussion to a pause just before we get into the interactive session. The first one coming out is, right from all the policies and the frameworks and the agreements that we've signed and the HAF that's being developed and being reviewed, how can we make sure to implement these policies and plans? What does government really have a plan in place for implementing and making sure that the child labor that we are talking about and we are having workshops on is really going to be able to move to the various communities where it needs to be addressed? Then the second issue is the one about coordination. On this panel alone, we have at least three different organizations that are working on child labor issues and child labor remediation. What are some of your ideas for how we can better coordinate each other so that we avoid the duplication of efforts, we avoid communities even taking advantage of that for their own economic enrichment? So how can we work on coordination amongst ourselves? And the third, which I think is such a rich contribution, is the issue of ownership. How do we get communities to own the issue of child labor so that it's no longer, foreigners coming to tell us that this is child labor, work on it. It's no longer government coming to tell us. It's no longer even people from Accra coming to tell us, but that the various communities own the issues of child labor and work towards eradicating it themselves at that level. So these are three very packed questions, and I think I'm just going to let the panel run, starting from Camille, and each of you will give your general ideas, and with that, we can open the floor for interactions. All right.
Okay, so I'll tackle the second question about how institutions or stakeholders can work together to achieve the goal that we want to achieve. I won't say PDA has not been, we've not experienced this issue of multiple organizations inside the community. We have experienced it before. From our side, what we have come to understand is that the Department of Social Welfare, which is the gatekeeper for all these communities in our project districts, they are the number one institution that we can work with to ensure that there are no duplication of effort or resources in other communities. So usually what we do is that before we even go into the community, we engage the Department of Social Welfare, we share our plans with them, we share our activities with them, and then we take their advice on how we can, where to go and what to do. But there also another challenge with the kind of work that we do is that most of the time our clients usually would want us to focus on their value chain. And so if you enter a community, some of our interventions are limited to only the people within the value chain. So one, the social welfare is the number one institutions that can help or bring all of us together, or that can coordinate our work within the district. But a lot of times when we enter into the district, we don't usually engage them. We have learned our lessons a long time ago, so anytime we do this, they are part of the work right from the beginning to the end. So currently it will be difficult for you to go into a PDA intervention community where there are duplication of some of these resources. So I would say the social welfare. And then again, I remember about a decade ago when child labor was a very key issue, ICI came up and it sort of became the institution that brought all other organizations, especially within the cocoa industry, together to pool resources and ideas together to address issues or eliminate child labor in Ghana. But somewhere along the line, I think that aspect was lost and people went back to doing their own things all over again. And so if all of us can have a common platform where we can all come together and share ideas, share strategies, I'm sure we can be able to circumvent some of the challenges that we have been experiencing. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. So I'll also start from the coordination. So I think personally government has to be commended because we were in the space and there was a vacuum. A lot has been done in as much as we blame the communities and the farmers that they have the information and they are not using, it's not causing the change. The rest of us also have a lot of information and resources, but we are not using. The point in case is that one of the best way to coordinate efforts is to have a platform where we are sure of where we are going, the targets, what is supposed to be done, and then those who have actually done something, how to report, in a unified system so you can see progress. Government has got some things in place, but even that, personally, I think is not coordinated. Even though we've made a lot of progress. One of them is the child labor monitoring system that we have since 2010. A lot of improvements have been made, but how many partners are actually using those platforms? We've got the current one, the SWIMS, that is also coming on board, which is an improvement, which is very good. But even some of the development partners and other industry will say they don't even know about it. And those who know about it don't actually know the full potential on that. So among the leadership, that is government that is leading us and we are following, there is a lot of duplication of efforts. So if you look at Auntie Lizzie this morning, she was saying that we were talking about they taking the data, entering the household information into the system. But there is a mandated body, the GNHR, the Ghana National Household Registry, that has conducted this with a lot of foreign money, where all households, we started, in fact, in 2019, we did the northern region, went back, did central. So all the households in those places, they have been enumerated. We have the data of the number of households we have and all that. But we are still going back with another government agency to collect that data. If you look at CMC application, the cocoa management system, we are going to collect it. If now the child labor unit is trying, they have almost finalized plans to be able to use the data that the GNHR has in our system. But then all the other partners that are in the field and industry are also collecting this data to be able to use it for child labor and other work. So if you want to go back to GNHR, for instance, which we've tried, to get the household registry information that they have so that you can build upon, you will see that then you have to do alignment of system, the data headers will have to be defined, and that is the type of coordination we are saying that somebody with a muzzle and budget should lead, so that there is a system in place, there is one place you go on whatever you want to do, and that particular agency links you and facilitates how to be able to work with the various places where we have these pockets of data information or mandates to coordinate it. And I think that if we're able to do that, we will make progress. So for private sector, we as ECOM, with our partners, are doing a lot. Now, this is the challenge. When we come to collaboration with government or anybody else, the issue of attribution and contribution comes in. And in as much as we would say that it's a national problem, we should come together and be able to solve it. When anybody is bringing money or commit resources to actually achieve something, they want to be sure that they have made some impact. And here we are, we don't even have data of where we were and where we are going. And then also, even if you get data that there has been improvement and reduction in child labor, some of the development partners, some of industry will want attribution for the work that they have done. That, this person contributed this and it has helped. That part also we are not able to seem to come together to agree on attribution and contribution. So if we talk about communities, as our brother said, the community owning it, taking their leadership, and then the community will also want to say that in our community, we have been able to do A, B, C. Even the community themselves want attribution. But then from my experience in industry, one of the key partners we have left is the leadership of the community, the National House of Chiefs, and then their elders. For some reason, If you look at all the partnerships we do, even for the NPA, WCF will sit down and represent cocoa. There will be other people representing. I think that we have sort of left that very good partner who are the leadership in those communities. And they have a very well organized, legalized, channel, the National House of Chiefs. So I think that that is one of the key areas we have to bring on board to make sure that we make progress. So what also I've seen is that most of the work we are doing is just building policies, framework, legalization, awareness creation. But then we will need one tool, one consolidated awareness creation tool, that is customized at the regional coordinating council level. So as our prof said, there are certain issues that we don't need to go and highlight in certain regions or communities. We need to have a harmonized tool, that we are all going to use. And therefore, when you have gone in to do that and you report it, there will be no need for me to also go that and report it, because now we are using different tools. And that is why we think that we all have to compete in the same space. The other part is that remediation has been left out totally. Like I said, all ideas has been on, coming up with a framework, defining awareness creation, but there are certain direct and indirect things that will cause child labor or would help the child to permanently alleviate or close that particular case. And we have the infrastructure gap, who is actually earmarking all the infrastructure gap that is clearly linked to child labor for us to be able to tackle as a group, so that there is a money in a pot to make sure that all these interventions from schools, from boreholes, are targeted towards child labor. Who is making sure that we have that? So if you look at the approaches we have, as we went with our partners, our approach is the indirect approach, where there are certain resources and certain information and certain enabling factors that are not present in the communities. We will go in, we will build schools based on our needs assessment, we'll build boreholes, we will cause additional livelihood, alternate income generating activities, VSLAs. We even partner PDA this year, we are doing what they should. So you'll be doing all this. There is also another company in that same community who wants to build schools. You contact GES, they will tell you, oh, don't build it here. We have plans to build school. And for the next 6 years, that school will never surface. Or they may even start and they will not even finish. And that is why we are saying that we are doing a lot. It may look as if we are repeating and duplicating efforts, but I don't see it that way. Because even where we think we are duplicating, are we seeing the progress that we should see? So it means that some of the targeted approach we are doing, some people have mandate. We started Pioneers as this way back more than 12 years ago, where the company decided to have a sustainable management services department, to take care of all the community interventions and then to make sure we bring rural prosperity. So it was a different wing. We started as an NGO, my department in the company, which was Novell. And we were able to do a lot of community development and target what are human rights due diligence systems to put in place. But then you see that when you pull out, or even the training you give to the social welfare, the planning person at the assembly, they will be reshuffled 2 or 3 years, and then a new person comes, then you go back to square one. You may not have the funding and the muscle to do what you did about 4 or 5 years ago, and then you are back to square one. Yeah. So what we are saying is that there will be the need for us to look at attribution and contribution to get more partners, and then more industry people to get involved, because when people spend money and they give effort, they want to be recognized. They want it to be attributed. We need to look at how we are going to do that. And then all the systems of reporting and then coming up with what we should do, intervention, just like the child labor free zones, but that concept cannot work fully. We can't just use one concept. But then we come up with all the things we need to do in all the various communities, so that when partner A goes, there is a set of things that he can choose to do. We clear it off the list, it's reported, coordinated, with the monitoring system or the swings or whatever we capture it, then we will be able to make progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I will start from the laws. They both left out the laws and went to coordination. So I'll pick that one. And I think laws and policies that government puts in place is something we should see as the first step of government's concern and commitment. Because when these laws and policies are developed, that is where we are able to, we are guided by those laws. It is our symbol of authority. It gives the institutions the mandate to do what they are supposed to do. And so with these laws and policies, it's based on them we are able to come out with plans, strategies as to what we have to do, and then we carry them out to protect our children. When you look at coordination, it is a very difficult task, as somebody mentioned, especially a ministry or an institution having to coordinate other ministries and other agencies, departments, efforts to be able to report that this is what we have done. That is what the Ministry of Employment and Labor Relations is facing. Our main task is to identify, that is the Labor Department, identifies the children working. And then we are also, the second phase is for us to coordinate what all other partners are doing. Some partners will even tell you that I wrote my proposal, went for my money, and I'm doing my work, so I'm only responsible to my donor. But we need to bring them to book to know that the government has institutions that have mandates and rules in relation to all the issues that are in the country. But we face these problems every now and then. And so with coordination, before, I think if we want it to work, during development of any plan and implementation of the plan, they should be involved. If they are not involved in the development, it becomes difficult to see themselves in it and to be able to report on such issues. So I think, though it's not easy, we are trying. And that is why we have the National Steering Committee, and almost everybody is on board. And we have this Partners Forum where we bring most of the NGOs also that have, made themselves known to us. There are NGOs that are working and we don't know them. They are in their own, even at the district level, the districts don't know. We went on monitoring to one of the districts, and then we were talking about a school in the one, and said, I don't know about it. That is district chief executive didn't know there was a school being built in one of the communities, yet the NGO was there and doing it. So sometimes we have these issues, but coordination, if we are involved, if we include everybody, it helps in coordination. Yes, the community registers, we are working with all the partners. Gender is one of our key partners. And so when you go to a community where the community register already exists, we don't collect information. We don't use it again. You only update if you have to. So that one, we are aware of it. We've been working with them. We know where they already have those ones done and where they are not. Even with NGOs, that is what they all have to use. When you get there, you first have to find out whether they have a community register or not before you go into also collecting one. So that will also help us. Then looking at ownership, especially at the community level, where we want communities to own the issues and sustain whatever interventions that we carry out at the community level. I see community entry very, very important. Sometimes we don't enter the communities very well, and that is where the people see it as a project. So if it's a project, they even name them. So the child labor is rather for those who are coming to help you solve your problem. So child labor for neighbor. So if the child labor people are coming, we know they are coming to give us some goodies. So we are ready for it. Because there are instances where the community child protection committees that are supposed to identify the vulnerable so that we can help put their children there. You go and they have 2, 3 of their children as part of those who need support. Meanwhile, the person may be a teacher, the person may be a farmer, somebody who can take care of the children, but because he or she has volunteered to be a committee member, push the children there. There are other instances where community members have had to let their children lie or do something to indicate that they are also in child labor because of the support they are giving to others and they are not getting. So it all depends on how we enter the community. If we have this community register I'm talking about, it spells out everything about the children in the various households, and you know those that are vulnerable and those that are not vulnerable. And based on that, if any child is added, you can easily detect that. So community entry is very, very important, and then how we deliver our interventions at the community level. Don't let it look like we are bringing money to, we are bringing the money to you. But make them part of it. You know, with the CCPCs, usually the traditional leaders are part of it. We know there are issues at the community level also, how people also think about interventions and other things, but let it look more local for them to buy in. Let it not look that you are introducing child labor, but let them see that what their children are doing, this is where their future is. It's difficult, but I think, like he said, we need to put in some strategies that will change behaviors. If the behaviors are changed, they can own these issues, and then we can easily eliminate child labor in Ghana and create child labor free zones. He said child labor free zones will not work fully, but child labor free zones, soon theater or no soon theater, let me pour it. Yes. I could not present the whole of the concept because of time, but what we are looking at, we like I mentioned, we will want, for instance, in a zone, we look at the partners that are there, what they are doing, what are you providing, what can I also provide? So it's not like one partner picking a zone and working to declare it as child labor free zone. Because before we even declare, the district will have to come out and tell us, and invite the assessment team. They will do their own self-assessment and say that, oh, we have met all these conditions, so we can be assessed. Then the assessment team can go in. So it's not one partner that has to work. Government is part, and we want is going to be local government led. We don't want to lead it from the national level, and so it must be led by the district. Initially, we defined the zone as a whole district, but we realized that we were so ambitious, and we will never get a district to be child labor free. So we decided, looking at the zonal council, area council, town council, where we have a number of communities within a district. In some districts, you can have 11 zonal councils. So if you pick a zone and you are working within, sometimes it will bring competition between the various zones. The zonal councils and area councils are not all functioning very well, but we are not going to use those structures as, having an office somewhere to be called, no, we are using them just as geographical areas, and then working with the district to see how we can provide the conditions and the structures that must exist. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I asked myself, why did Auntie Lizzie receive the mic before me?
You gave me the mic. I forgot that.
She has spoken a lot, and I have some few points to add to the discourse. With government, I think government has done well, but more needs to be done in terms of resource allocation. We all know when you go to the district assembly, the social welfare community development offices, They don't look nice. I know UNICEF is helping with logistics. Other NGOs are coming on board, but much needs to be done. For instance, the Human Trafficking Act has a human trafficking fund. I know when we went to Tier 2 watch list, according to the Trafficking Persons report, government was very cautious. They started releasing money to the fund to make sure it gets a lot of international goodwill. But we believe government can open up that fund to citizens. I know Ghanaians can give. All that they need is they need accountability and transparency. You can publish numbers, mobile money numbers or Medium where people can contribute. Then later you give account in terms of reports, the fund utilization, the number of survivors you are helping. And that will, let people give. Because I know even in our side, churches raise funds, and I sometimes see people raising funds on buses and in the streets to support the vulnerable. And I know when you go to churches and well-to-do people in our society, they will give if you can only give a report on how the fund is being utilized. So we can use that avenue to grow the human trafficking fund. And I know it can grow to the extent that we can support more survivors in the country. And social protection.
Okay, 1 second. Sorry, I'm being signaled that our time is up. So I'll ask you to just briefly, point it out so that Prof. Marfo can also just comment. And then I'm sure when the questions start flooding in, you would have the opportunity to respond more comprehensively.
Okay, thank you. So social protection. I believe the key to solving vulnerabilities is strengthening social protection system in the country. Let our social protection programs work. In developed countries, that's what save people. Sometimes people don't work and they're giving unemployment benefits. And you ask yourself, can that happen in Ghana? Let's let social protection work to protect the vulnerable. So predators and slave masters won't take advantage of them. We also have to make sure, with coordination, the NGOs in trafficking space, we have the Coalition of NGOs Against Child Trafficking. We realized it was a problem, so we formed a coalition in 2017. It's loose, but there is a lot of challenges. There are organizations that are children, there are youthful organizations that are grown-ups, so the capacity issue internally is a problem. And also in terms of competing for funds. So we are trying to sanitize and solve this situation to make sure we coordinate better and also work with the Human Trafficking Secretariat. When it comes to the community ownership, I think we should promote bottom-up approach to planning. Let's make sure the district assemblies, the medium-term development plans capture the activities and don't ignore the development, the district planning coordinating unit. They form the heads of the various departments. Involve CCPC members and the unit committees. The structures are there. We just have to strengthen it and be truthful to them. Because if you are entering a community, you don't tell them the truth. They will try to put their children in. We've encountered settlements. Some even use it to campaign for their electoral elections and stuff. These are challenges we've seen in projects we implement in the community. So we should just let them know the negative impact of not recruiting the right children as beneficiaries. And I know there are rational beings to support the cause. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I will be very brief. I wanted to just speak on ownership, and much has been said about that. I think we should let the communities own what we mean by child labor. And I'm also happy I've gotten some information that interventions have been tried, and then we are Ghanaians, and some people, or the system is not, it's being corrupted, right? Yes, that's for want of a better word. Yeah, so I think we should let the chiefs lead, because we have a lot of examples where the chiefs have intervened. For instance, in some communities, the chiefs declare that the children cannot go for wakekeeping. The children don't go for wakekeeping. So the community should define themselves what they think are labor children should not be involved in. And then if they define it themselves, they will be able to police it. And then two, the interventions then should not be targeted because there's going to be abuse. So maybe it should be rather, they themselves, when they define it, they should have solutions to those who fall, let's say, through the net. What are we doing as a community? Then nobody will bring the child. The teacher, the headmaster will not bring his child as child labor, where there's a child who rather needs it. So I think that is, in short, we need to encourage the communities. So once, madam, you go to the communities, let them define it themselves. Visit the chiefs. Let the chiefs lead. So when we say chiefs, see, the small ones, the big crows can start before we come to the paramount ones. So the small ones, they start defining it themselves. Before we realize, it's not going to be tomorrow though, but we'll make a headway whereby they will not abuse the system of the interventions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right. So it's been wonderful panel. I am moving back, but I think you would have to stay here as people interact so that Peter will moderate the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Asida, for moderating this session for us. We have been receiving questions and contributions from our online participants. And so this is how we are going to do it. I understand most of us also have contributions, so we'll be taking contributions from you. But first of all, we'd have to take some from our online participants. So this is from David Kobo. There was a question on the meaning of child labor, and he succinctly answers the question. So he says, I would argue that it encompasses all activities that threaten the child's development. For this discussion, it is helpful to conceptualize the relevant priorities in a child's development as including A, education, of which play is a vital and bona fide component, and B, physical development, and C, nurture, which is also principally by parents or guardian, but schools and communities also have a role. So under point A, if the form, the point A is education. So if the form, timing, and duration of a task compromises a child's schooling, it is child labor. Similarly, if the task imperils the child's health or physical development, like carrying heavy loads or using dangerous implements or spraying toxic chemicals, it is also child labor. That answers the point B. And then the C is when it says we would be looking at tasks that expose the child's mind to unsafe habits. Example, when we send children to buy tobacco, or when we involve them in galamsey sites. So even if these tasks take little of a child's time, the negative nurture makes it child labor. So this is how David Kobo, who is also a development practitioner, puts or summarizes the whole discussion about the meaning of child labor. So we have another question and contribution from Eliezer Taki, who works with Beyond Beans. So he says, what would you advise as the best approach to remediating child labor? In my opinion, a preventive approach would be more sustainable than a response approach, which makes PDA VSLA intervention on child labor somewhat sustainable. Something I find very important is to compare child labor prevalence statistics in communities where VSLAs are established and those that do not have VSLAs established. Not sure if PDA has conducted any impact analysis to measure this. If yes, it would be good to share the outcome with us all. So if PDA has conducted any impact analysis in that regard, you would want to share. Okay. So there hasn't been any impact analysis in that regard. So I'm sure in the coming years, if we do that, we would share the findings with our partners. So at this point, I'll give the opportunity to our in-person participants if there are questions or contributions. I understand we have experiences with child labor and, the working child when we were growing as children. If you would want us to know how your experiences were, you can raise your hand and the mic would come to you to share your experience. Yes.
Thank you very much for this workshop and for also, enlightening us on some of these
child labor issues. Yeah, I grew up, I'm a typical villager. I grew up in a very typical village. I'm from Nkrofo, so that's where I grew up. But growing up as a child, as young as I was, 7 years, I was going to farm. 4:30 a.m., my grandmother woke us up. We have to go to the farm before we now come, do our household chores before we go to school. But going to the farm, sometimes we go past the cemeteries and other, meet other obstacles before we get the main farm. And though I've lived that kind of life, I've left that system many years ago, that impacted my life, even though I was able to move, and most of my colleagues, as we speak, I think about out of 50, maybe I'm the only one who was able to escape that kind of practice, because some of them could not make it, in terms of education and all that. They drop out of school, did all manner of things and all that. Even my mate, as I speak, his son has finished poly. My own mate, his son is a poly graduate, and expect that I should look for a job for the son. I mean, that was our life. So even till date, I also I have that phobia for cemeteries, even though I've lived that, So there's this psychological bit of child labor. Maybe people have not actually paid attention to. Till date, I have phobia because I went past, cemeteries all the time, going to the farm at dawn and all those things. Sometimes you see all manner of things. You see the river, somebody's bathing, you don't see the person, those kind of things. But for our grandparents, it was normal. But to us, in fact, at the time, it was normal. But those were proper, typical child labor abuse. Even to date, I'm suffering from, I have a phobia for cemetery and all that. So I think maybe in all of this, we also sometimes thinking about some of the psychological effect that it has, even when we grow up and we live that kind of system. So I think we should look at that aspect as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Okay.
All right, please. My name is Godwin Kuyole from Shraj. And I remember I ever asked Madam Lizzie this same question, which I'm coming to ask you again. She came to our office with Variety, and I'm going to ask it because, one, I noticed that the data that is channeled on child labor is, as a researcher, looks very inaccurate. And if you want to deal with situations like this, and it's not ad hoc, and you want to deal with them in terms of practice, I think that as a nation, we need accurate data, in the sense that what are the number of children that we have currently that are either in child labor or they are working children? And I thought that when they were doing the recent population, if the ministry didn't have enough money to gather accurate information, I don't know what prevented them from adding relevant questions to the statistical department, from giving us something to work with as a nation. That, look, we have the total number of population being estimated as this. Per the statistical department, they have given us a rough idea about what we are talking about, instead of relying on other information that are not to update. I will need information. And then secondly, my other issue has to do with, whilst we are doing the National Action Plan, are we taking into, I have been on field myself. So about 2 years ago, we even had interaction with Challenge Heart at Winneba. Yes, so we also have children that have phobia to do vocational work. He doesn't want to go to school. From day one, the child have decided that I wouldn't go to school. We did Volta Region, several places, which has absolutely nothing to do with a parent or a guardian. But we stayed in the community for like a month. We assisted the children to buy his first education. But education is not only formal education, but we have other forms of informal education that are also from day one, the child has to go through that kind of practice of training, which, if we want to go by this ILO definitions and all those things, will constitute child labor. But it is an apprenticeship for the child. I just want to know whether in our context we have been a bit flexible to cater for those kind of children who, by birth, I don't mean criminal activities like prostitution. A child cannot say, I have phobia for prostitution. I'm not talking about those ones. I'm talking about a child who grows up and say, I want to be a farmer. I want to be a fisherman. I want to engage in cocoa farming. I don't want to step in a classroom. Does your national action plan take into consideration from day one how we can deal with this category of children, so that how we will classify them and what can the nation do to make sure that instead of them ending as peasant farmers, they may end up rather become commercial farmers? I mean, which is possible in other geographical locations. You see that people just go, I want to be a farmer. And there's a process the person takes through. And instead of being a peasant farmer who cannot even feed himself or herself, he rather end up being a commercial farmer. So that we don't have this choke. We are getting a lot of formal educations also hanging at the top there. He has gone through all the education, he's choked. There's no employment for the person. And we are having millions of graduates hanging at the top. Now we want to feed ourselves and there's no food.
Okay, thank you very much for your contribution. Okay, so we have quite a number of people that want to ask questions, but let me read this question before I come to you. So Anita Jando is joining us via Zoom. She's asking, I have not heard anything about sexual exploitation and sex workers among children, including child marriage. Don't they constitute child labor, and how does that situate in this child labor conversation? I think it was briefly talked about. We didn't really delve into details, but if any of our panel members would want to briefly talk about child sexual exploitation, we would be grateful.
Yeah, children not wanting to go to school from day one. I think the country or Ghana has a free, compulsory, universal basic education. So what we expect is that at least the child should have the basic education. We are not against children desiring to do farming or any form of activity or work. What we are looking at is that they should have the basic knowledge on some of these areas so they can do it better. Because look at the farming sector. These days they use fertilizers and all those things. How to mix them. So if you are not educated, how do you read those ones? So the basic education is very important. But after basic education, if the person wants to go into farming, you want to do whatever, we are not even against children going to farm with their parents, especially biological parents and their farms. We allow that so that the child can learn some of the things and then do it better. So for that, I don't know if the answer I've given is good, but that is what we are looking at. We want children to have the basic education, and then you can go into whatever you want to do so you can do it better. Then talking about the data, I think we have raised it several times. It is a challenge to us because most times we have these questions coming and we don't have answers. Talking about maybe collaborating with or talking to Ghana Statistical Service, the ministry has done it. And for them to include child labor indicators, it is a cost. So usually this is what they tell us. During the GLSS round 6, we had a child labor component. And so we have that data there. And that was because UNICEF and ILO were ready to pay the cost for us. And that was done. And subsequently, they didn't leave it, took it out because they said it's a cost. And they are waiting. Yes, we are in different ministries. So they expect that we should be able to give some funding for that to be done. But we are talking with partners to see if we can do a stand-alone. And also, we want to see how we can incorporate these indicators into some of these surveys that are regular. I know they'll also talk of the cause, but I think if the topmost people are able to come together and are able to see that this will help us, and we agree on some terms, we'll be able to do that, so that any time you collect those data, we should be able to have child labor issues coming up. So we are actually working at getting the data.
Okay.
And somebody spoke of that we didn't mention
yes,
commercial
yes.
sexual.
Yes.
Under the National Plan of Action, you know, we have the worst forms of child labor. And so we have prioritized those that we are dealing with immediately. And commercial sexual exploitation is one of them, that's especially for children. And we say CSEC. CSEC. So
right.
we are dealing with it, except that we don't have several, or we don't have many partners interested in that area. So there's little that government does, and then a few partners who work in that area. So,
okay.
So let me ask Madam one question. From my experience, the health sector is one institution that is able to give us very detailed information every year.
yeah.
If you take the education sector, they can give you data on enrollment, on retention, on school dropouts, and all that.
Yeah.
The police can give you the number of accidents, the number of casualties, and all that. Can't we, in a way, see or explore the opportunity of how we can ride on some of these institutions at the district level to also mobilize data on child labor? Is this something that can be explored?
Well, noted, we will explore it. Yes, we will explore it to see what comes out. But we work with them, so just as you are saying, we can get those informations, but we can also see how they can help us in when they are collecting their data, so they could add some of the indicators to give us.
Thank you very much for your contributions and submissions. There was a question or contribution here.
Yes, please, it's a contribution. My name is Nanajo Abunsu. I work with the International Child Development Program. Yes, please. Prof mentioned something about the urban poor. And in the discussions, I heard child labor in Galamsey, cocoa, fishing, and then an online contributor also mentioned commercial sex exploitation. But I didn't hear about Okada. Okada is gaining momentum, especially in the urban poor areas. We're having an intervention in Amasama area, and we encountered situations where school children below the legal age, you know, having to go and do their Okada business to be able to sustain them. Yeah. And you know, we encountered one situation where the boy, who was about 14 years, was the breadwinner. So, madam, even though you just mentioned something about getting the basic education, here is a boy who was in school but wasn't doing assignments, wasn't punctual, most of the time absent from school. He's in school all right, but he's not getting the full benefit of what he's supposed to get in school. So these are some of the issues, and I think that we need to pay some attention to Okada, because there's a lot of child labor issues in that sector too.
Thank you very much. We receive a contribution. My apologies. So we would have to. So you can go ahead with your.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Cynthia Adi from International News Ghana. So I'm happy to be here. I mean, all the things that we have said, it means that we are doing a lot. But still, we still need to do more. My brother shared about children who have the opportunity to go to school, but they don't want to go to school. But we've gone to communities where they don't have schools at all. They don't have lights. And we saw that child labor stuff were going on. And until they get schools, it will still go on. So we should look at how best we can help those communities. Because if they have to walk more than the 2 kilometers, I'm not sure they'll go to school. And again, we are looking at issues of sustainability. We've been doing this work for a very long time, but still it's persistent. What can we do to ensure that the work that we have started or the work that we are doing now, we can continue? We've trained people. Why is it that when we leave the communities, then the message just stops? So we should look at how best we can look at those things. In my organization, we use a participatory approach where we engage everybody at the different levels, especially at the community level. We make sure that before we enter into any community, we work with the district level stakeholders so that they let us know which organizations are doing what. We have a criteria that we use. And then this helps us to reduce duplications. And then we have also worked on areas related to the worst forms of child labor, that's CSEC, and then child marriage, child trafficking, and all those other issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cynthia. Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Abna. I'm from the Ministry of Gender. When the panelists were talking, I don't know, I forgot this, is it Isaac? He talked about social change. Because when you go to the community, there is still the community members know about child labor, but it still persists. For the Ministry of Gender with other partners, there is a social change campaign. That is, we call it Ghanaian Against Child Abuse. And that one, we go into the community, we generate community discussion on the various topics, and which child labor is part of it. Then, so for this year alone, I looked into our data, we have sensitized 18,000 and over people on child labor alone. We do not impose the issue of child labor on them, but it's just that we show them a flashcard and it generates community interaction, community participation, community ownership, and they design how they can effect that change. So it's not as if Accra people have come, even it's not even Accra people who go and do that education. It is called the Community Facilitation Toolkit. So it has 2 components. We have the social media and the mass media side. They have the community one also. So that's the district assembly, which is the social welfare and community development officers and other partners. International Needs is also on board. We have World Vision, we have Plan Ghana, we have Action Aid. It's a whole document that which all our stakeholders in the Child Protection Center came on board to develop that document. So it's online. You can just come, you look for it online. But the only thing is, we train you so that you also train your institutions so that they can also do that, because we want to have a standardized way of approaching child protection issues. So this is one of the things that we do. So we first is social change. We have a lot of topics. We have sexual abuse, we have child online protection, we have physical abuse, we have verbal abuse. We have about 11 pillars. We call it 11 communication pillars that we have. So you can go to iamgaka.org, then go and look at how we are going about our social behavioral change campaign. And also effect that change also when you go. I saw that when we're doing the VSAL documentary, you were using some kind of flashcard to go around. You can augment that one too with the community child protection facilitation toolkit. To do that, it generates a lot of issues. We have gender equality. Right. So it is a very important thing. Then also, when we're talking about the CSEC, I know my ministry, which is the research unit at the main ministry, I work at the Department of Children. For the main ministry, UNICEF has supported to organize a study on CSEC in Ghana. I know they want to do data collection, so the reports will be coming out very soon. With including holding our district assemblies and our MMDAs responsible for child protection issues. I know when we were developing the new sector medium plan for Ghana, they included indicators on child protection, which child labor is part also, so that every district assembly or municipal or metropolitan assembly will be judged on these child protection indicators, because there's a whole section on child protection. So when you go to a community and you've not been able to achieve certain things, it will go against you. I know when the regional monitoring team are going to the district assembly for monitoring, they include those things, so you will be measured on those things. So it is the government of Ghana is doing, so we urge all of us to come on board and help us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abna. So just by way of asking a question, is it also possible that you do some quarterly newsletters so that you can share what you are doing as a ministry? For example, the toolkit that you mentioned, those documents can be contained in the newsletters, so those of us who are working on the field can have access to some of them.
Okay, for the toolkit, we train you. We train you on the toolkit. We train you on the social protection program. That's the campaign. Then we set you up on there. We have a monitoring app. So we set you on the app. So when you go and do your work, when you go and do the sensitization, the awareness creation, then you log on. You log on and report. So we have real-time data. So as at now, we have from January to November data on how far you've gone with the reaching out to people. So for the quarterly one, we report to we have a committee that I heard you people talking about the community child protection toolkit. So for the child and family welfare policy and the justice for children policy, there is a coordination structure in the operational plan for the implementation of such policy, which is we start from the community, we go to the district, then the regional. But we have few community child protection committees. Then we go to the district, we have few also. But the region, they meet quarterly. So the region, the community reports to the district. So they meet quarterly. So that's where we give out those information to our stakeholders on how far we've gone. Okay. But we do not have, maybe we have to think about it next year. Maybe produce a newsletter on it for our stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we'll take one question in person, and then we'll take one online. There's an interesting question that I'm reading here, and I would like us to explore, but we have very limited time. So let's hear from you.
All right. So thank you. I'm Lucy from Saber Education. So just for clarity, I want to know, is my voice loud? It's loud.
So they are picking it from.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. I want to know what the difference is. Just for clarity, as I said, what constitutes hazardous work? Because as I go home, I'm also from the village, and I need to go and then do some sort of sensitization. So what constitutes that in our Ghanaian context? Okay. And then the second one is, do you have any data to compare what is the rate between the coastal areas and then the farming areas? Do you have any data to just show what the child labor rates are? So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes. So let's take one final question or contribution, and then. Okay. No. There was a woman at the back. I think the conversation is getting interesting. So, do we all agree that we extend the time to maybe 5 minutes? Okay. So the consensus is that we are not extending. So we have to stay within time. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Akuya, Sustainable Development Alliance. When my brother from Chirac was talking, he said that there are children who have a phobia for attending school. And then Madam also said that free compulsory universal basic education demands that every child is in school. I was wondering, as CSOs and PDA writing something about what you are doing, is it possible we could let an avenue come where those children, if it happens that they are in great quantities, there are a number of them, is it possible we could get something to give them informal education? This child wants to be a farmer in future, so that he doesn't, he should be able to write his name, read in between lines where he has to get a contract on something. So as CSOs and the government representative here, reps here, is there something that we could do to get those children get education? What he said is actually changing something I have, or some perception I have about some children in my community. So I wish something could be done about that one, to get those children also educated.
Okay, thank you very much. So the last question I'm reading from our Zoom chat. So this is very interesting. So what about teachers involving children in child labor activities during school time? So this is from Jonas Averitiga. And this is something that I've personally experienced before. In basic school, we were made to carry blocks and bricks. Sometimes we were made to go to people's farm to sift palm nuts from the chaff. So what are we doing as educationists in that regard? How are we helping children who are being used to work, and those who are actually supposed to be in classroom are made to work or engage in child labor activities?
So we as practitioners in the field, you come to this gray area that the have for cuckoo or prescribe working with sharp instruments, but these children are asked to bring cutlasses to school, and on the first day they are made to weed around the school, and we won't count that as child labor. See, the old rules, that's my Madam Auntie Lizzie said, we need to, because we want to now make them into laws, there are some of the gray areas we just have to refine, because you can't prosecute people for that. Remember that under the Ghana Education, you are allowed to have some punishment that are prescribed and some activities that are prescribed for children to do. And some of them even include agriculture. So they are supposed to, these children that are below 15 years, whether they are in GSS, they are supposed to have beds, they are supposed to weed the plant, the crops as project and part of that. And if you apply the half, you would think that this is child labor. So for those approved school activities, you exempt them. Now when they are being abused, because sometimes the teachers take them to their own house and farms, those ones should be reported, and the school authorities will deal with that. You see, the child labor doesn't mean that there are certain people sitting somewhere who should determine or punish people that are actually violating the rights of children. So when it happens on the school premises, the school has the structure to prefer whatever punishment the teachers deserve, or refer them, if it is worst form of child labor, to the appropriate unit. So I'll dovetail that into our sister who had the trauma. One of the point of remediation is, which we don't take care about because it is too much work, is actually the traumatized victims. How to psychology, and the psychology behind that, how to bring them out of that. If you look at something like DOFSU, most of us don't understand. See, there is the victim support unit. So apart from the issue, the victim support unit, they will refer that particular person who has gone through that trauma to make sure they see somebody who is a professional to help them to overcome that. So whether it's sexual abuse, whatever it is, physical abuse. So that is the part of remediation. That because we are overwhelmed and we don't have much resources, we tend to lose the sight of. So we think we have brought the person out of the child labor or out of the situation,
but the person has a psychological part we have not dealt with. As a country, it is an area we are improving, but we have much to be desired. And then also on our brother on adding some details to the census. You know, census is the most expensive and the biggest data collection activity for any country. And there are protocols and international protocols that when you do it, you should be able to churn out certain data. So there are guidelines for it. And the processing for the questionnaire, the things you can add because you want to be able to complete it. In fact, our own is population and housing census. So you can see that we've added 2 things, you know, and because of that, already the questionnaires are voluminous. There is data on employment, and the age of employment is there. But we will not have the various child labor indices added to a census, a national census. It cannot be done. The cost will be too huge. So most of these activities are done as survey. And one of the key one, we can either have a general survey for it, or we can then incorporate it back if there's funding to the Ghana Living Standard Survey, which sets the basis, you know, with their first one. I think the GLSS 6. So that is sometimes the difficulty. It is a purely a budgetary thing. And even currently, we don't have money to do the census ourselves. The government component that is bringing sometimes is just 40%, and then there's a matching grant, and then, you know, the UNFPL will come in to also do. So it's a whole process. So it is not very easy for one ministry to push a lot of information into that. Thank you, and over.
What is hazardous work? Yes, our sister asked. And the definition is that any activity that's likely, that has the tendency to hurt or harm the child is termed hazardous. When we talk of the worst forms of child labor, they are in 4 categories, and hazardous work is one of them. Then we have trafficking, bonded labor, forced labor, child soldiers, that is another category. We have illicit activities such as pickpocketing and drug peddling as one. Then we have the prostitution, pornography, and that group also. So there are 4. And the hazardous activities, the other 3 are all criminal. So for those ones, if a child is seen, you are supposed to be immediately removed. But it is the hazardous work that we always play with. When the child is found in work that is hazardous, you either remove the child from the hazard or the hazard from the child. Yes, that is what you have to do. These are the 2 options that you have. And so anything that can harm the child is termed hazardous. We can give examples. Can you give me any example of an activity that if a child is carrying out, it can hurt the child?
So what I was thinking back from my village. Yeah. So I was sent to the farm to cut firewood. Okay. So do I term that as hazardous? Because I was less than 11 years, I think 9 years, okay, and using the cutlass for
so this one is obvious.
It's obvious. But this has become like I saw it as it's normal. So if I go to my village and then tell someone or my mom, okay, don't send ABCD, you know. But this is what I have done, and I'm sitting here. So what would my mom say?
I told you my story, didn't I? So sometimes we think that it is normal, but it actually hurts or harms the children. The child can be injured and then have a defect. And it's been happening. It's not just, they are not just things we are saying, but it's been happening. But we are not also saying, there are some of the things we need to look at. The age, as you mentioned. And then sometimes supervision is very necessary. But we are saying that a child at age 13 can do light work. What do we term as light work? When we go to the hazardous activity framework, even with the tricycle my sister was talking about, it's in there. We will know what is hazardous, what is light work, and then what they can do or not. Sometimes they've done it several times and it's part of them. But the way children think and the way adults is not the same. Maybe the prof can tell us how adults and children think and how they can be affected by some of the simple things that we think is normal.
Unfortunately,
maybe somebody can have
extra time for other contributions. Else, we would have taken some more questions and contributions because we've run out of time. But I also like the fact that Mr. Francis talked about the fact that when you see a child abuse case or child labor case in schools, the students can even report. But that's a very dicey situation because when you go to villages, students want to impress their teachers. So
I like the point
the conversation is interesting, but I think unfortunately we may have to end here. So if you have any question, you can send an email to info@PDA Ghana, and we will share with our honorable panel members, and they would be willing to answer all your questions. So once again, thank you very much for making time to join us here. And before we end, I would like to invite Godsway Jato to give us the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Peter, for this opportunity. I believe today has been a very great day discussing the various aspects of child labor and its remediation. And on the approaches of how to remediate child labor, on pointers such as having the various partners collaborating in their efforts of remediating child labor in the various communities, I think is one that is worth noting. And also on ensuring that advocacy continues. It doesn't just end here. All those have been very great. And I don't think I would want to go through all the pointers. On that point, we would like to thank our very honorable panel members that are present here that have helped us in no particular order. Our very own Professor Manfo, Mr. Francis Ahiamata, Mr. Kamil Abdul Salam, and Mrs. Elizabeth Ankumbere, and Mr. Jonathan Anderson. I've made it so sorry. Thank you very much for all your insightful presentations and discussions and providing answers. And to all participants here representing the various organizations, we will not be able to mention all your organizations, the names of your organization, but we are very grateful, as well as those who were able to join us online. We are very grateful for your questions and your contributions. Right. So on that point, also, we would also want to thank the partners that helped us to bring our safe knowledge sharing on child protection. Today, we had Free the Slaves as well as the Department of Children. So on behalf of PDA Management Board, we are very grateful for your presence here and your contribution. We believe that the discussions that we've had here are not going to end just within this workshop. It's going to be continuous. Hopefully, it's going to go a long way to help in the fight of remediating child labor in our communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Godsway. So before we leave here, we have ladies and gentlemen from PDA at the back. Please see them for something for transportation. And I think lunch is also ready. I'm not too sure. So we would have to take our lunch before we leave. So once again, thank you for making time to join us, and see you another time.